How many of you guys have experience with this? Okay, this is something that I have seen with my own eyes. Okay, where a property that we are managing, I went inside, it was upside down with all the rotten food, okay, rotten food, and the whole floor is oily, the ceiling was oily, and this is something that, you know, we definitely don't want to experience if you are a house owner, okay. This, just to refurbish the whole house, will cost us quite a lot. So to avoid this, we also have to use a proper tenant management company, right? So a proper tenant management company, I believe she will share later how they are managing all these kind of issues and how are they making sure this kind of situation does not happen. So we have our speaker today, okay, Miss Hazel Leong. Okay, I know her for a while already, and I know she have a lot of experience managing all kind of tenants, and they have a very good system that they do profiling.
Hi, I'm Hazel from ICONIX. So today I'll be sharing about how we manage properties on behalf of our owners. And when we talk about property management, it's really more about tenant management. Like the pictures Suvan showed, right, is really quite common, very common if we do not manage the tenant properly. So over here, we'll share about how we do it exactly for the investors. ICONIX is an engineering company, so every decision we make, right, is very based on the data that we see. So, but of course, the problems is universal to all. So as an investor, right, these are the common problems that all investors see. That means if you want to own the property, definitely we have to overcome these problems here. So as an investor, the first thing we do when we get a property, definitely renovation. Right, so when it comes to renovation, it is most common that there are many delays, a lot of delays. So over here, as an owner, we have to navigate which type of renovation design, what kind of contractors to use, and all that. One thing very important that we have to remember as investors is that when we renovate something, a property, we actually have to renovate it based on the tenant profile, because property investment is very long term. So when it's very long term, we don't renovate something based on what we want. We actually have to renovate it based on the time frame that we are planning to hold it, and also based on the tenant profile market that we are targeting. So this one is really important. A lot of times we've met many investors, they will share with us ideas about what kind of design they want and all that. Then we actually have to remind them again, this is an investment. Like what we know, right? Don't fall in love with your investment, right? So we actually tell them you have to take a look at it, and then only renovate it based on whatever tenant profile you are really targeting. So the other problems, once we have renovated, okay, so the unit is nice already, and we have our target tenants. The other things that we always have to, as investors, we have to deal with are actually the tenants. All things after that are actually tenant management. So that's where we have to be very good at screening, very strict with the tenants, because our property is our investment, and if we are planning to hold it for 5-10 years, we have to really make sure that our investment survives. So whatever tenant that comes into the property, tenants come and go, the property remains. So we really have to screen out things like all the tenant scams is very common in Malaysia, and phantom tenants. Phantom tenants are like you think you're renting to this lady, but in actual sense, she has sublet it to a bunch of other people that we do not know. So that's where a lot of problems start to happen, because the owner, who is normally not around, will always trust this tenant who's paying on time, right? Because when they sublet it to someone else, normally the sublet tenant will pay on time, just to make sure that, you know, the owner doesn't come checking. This one also causes a problem because we do not actually know who's staying in the house. And then, of course, as a property investor, taxes is very important. So at ICONIX, what we do is that we have to be accountable for every dollar in and out of the accounts, both for the investors and also for the tenants. So this one is like a case study, a typical example of how do you actually renovate a property for it to gain its best yield. So like you can see here, right, this is a typical example of a condo apartment. So the first thing we do is that we have to identify the target market. So like over here is somewhere in Cheras, it's a building in Cheras. So we first have to know For the master room, right, it's going to be rented out about 1,000 ringgit odd. So who are the actual tenants that's going to be rented to? For here, we identify that they are going to be the office professionals nearby, and they are mainly from the MNCs. Then how about the middle rooms? Middle rooms, we have to identify exactly, okay, these are going to be the shop employees and the office admins that are also working nearby. And then of course comes to when you see the smaller rooms. So this one, our marketing survey already targets that these are going to be filled up by the many restaurant people that are working nearby. So when we target like this, right, even before renovation, we already know who exactly are our tenants. And one thing we must know that we shouldn't be afraid of foreign tenants. Actually, foreign tenants make very good tenants. Based on all the data that we have, right, foreign tenants they are a bit loud, but other than that, they are actually very good referrals. They will always refer their colleagues, their friends, and they more or less will listen to rules. So when their tenancy agreements, they are more likely to follow rather than local tenants. They are more likely to tell you, yeah, other places is okay. Why should we do it this way and all that? So what I want to emphasize here is that based on our thousands of tenant data, right, what we can conclude is that if you manage properly, actually foreign tenants make very good tenants. They also pay more, so it's actually quite good. Another thing about managing the property is that if we want it to grow long term over the next 5-10 years, we have to be very careful and very aware about where our tenants are coming from. So this one is an example. This is actually our actual units along along the MRT1 line. So what I'm showing here is that this one is a recent data just from last week, November. It shows that our properties, right, if managed properly, last week, all three properties along these main lines all achieve occupancy of more than 90%. Yeah, and you know, if along the property line here, right, this is a property in Sungai Buloh that we have already had for 3 years, and then in Kota Damansara 2 years, and down here in Taman Konot about 1.5 years ago. So when you are buying a property, you have to buy a property where you actually know the tenant market very well. So when you know the tenant market very well, this is the kind of results that you have to aim for, 90% and above occupancy. That is how the property can really survive through the years. So like I mentioned, ICONIX is mainly an engineering company. So every data that we have is run through the system. And from there, the entire property management is actually driven by the system itself. So all the way from rental collection, bill payments, the access cards, the suppliers, even the interactions with the GMB is all recorded in the system. So in that way, right, every day our system is actually processing a lot of data in order for us to properly profile the tenants. So same like what Suren showed earlier, this is not uncommon, and this is an actual room that even with the best profiling and the best tenant management, so sometimes these kind of tenants do get through. Yeah, this is actually a lady in an MNC company, very good profile, accounts manager, but when she opened her door, it looks like this. So no matter how nice the tenant, when we see them acting like this, we have to, no matter what, terminate them and forfeit their deposits. Definitely have to. So this one brings us to the second year trap. A lot of investors, we have to tell them that a property is something that we have to take care of, and it's something that we have to hold over 5 and 10 years. And this one is a graph showing, right, what we see in the market today. When the property is new, whether we self-manage or the agent manage it or a professional manager manage it, it is all okay. The occupancy will be quite high, especially at the beginning, the first round of tenants, because the property is new, everything is new. The problem often comes in during the second cycle of tenants. That means the second year, when there's a first change of tenants. That is when there's a big differentiation between the self-managed, the agent-managed, and those that are professionally managed. So once the property is not properly managed in the second year, and the unit is ugly and dirty, and the tenants are running out of control, what will happen is very common. The rental yield will drop for that property. The owner is under pressure to rent it out, right? So very often they will drop rental prices. For us at ICONIX, what we did was that even through the MCO, MCO1, MCO2, and all the FMCO until today, what we have done is that we have managed to maintain the rental prices in the market. Because only by maintaining the rental rates, right, we can actually provide the same level of service that we have been providing all the while. And what tenant wants more than anything is actually a safe environment, a very safe environment. So even during the MCO, we have managed to maintain the rental rates. Occupancy did drop a little, but nothing very significant, nothing like 50% or 70% like they claim in the market. More like maybe a slight drop, only slight dip, mainly because of the foreign tenants. Yeah. So when we talk about profiling, there's a lot of bias when it comes to landlords and the tenants that they want, a lot of bias. So in order to cut through all the biasness and just choose which are the best tenants for your property, we have to look at data. So even as a normal owner for one unit, you have to look at the data around you and then judge it unemotionally. So what we see here is, let's go through one. DSR is a property way up in Sungai Buloh. I will compare it with a property in Old Klang Road. DS is in Old Klang Road. So these two are in two ends of the Klang Valley. So what we see is that we have to be very aware when you have a property in Sarah here. What we can see is that half of them are employed, the other half are students. At least we know there is a 50-50 chance. 50-50 chance of a student and a 50% employed. So when we are gearing up our marketing team or the agents, at least we can tell them these are who do we gear for. And of course, once we know these are 50% students, of course, we have to start targeting exactly where are they coming from. So when it comes to the Old Klang Road property, you can see big majority are actually employed. Students, very, very few. But when we ask in the market, right, when we ask our colleagues, our friends and normal owners, they will say, Sungai Buloh, surely all foreign workers. And then Old Klang Road, definitely all, a lot of students, because Old Klang Road, there are a lot of colleges nearby. But when you look at the data, right, it's very different. In the Old Klang Road area, majority are employed. Students, very few. So as an investor, when we see this kind of data, at least we know our properties in the Old Klang Road area, around this area. So who is our target? They're actually the employed. And then when it comes to male or female, who likes to rent more? What we see is that it's evenly distributed, 50-50, looks the same. So when it comes to the Sungai Buloh property, a lot of people say Sungai Buloh, definitely all foreigners. That's the perception we got from everyone. But when we pull out the data, this is what we saw. Look at the Malaysian bar here. It's like more than any other countries, Yemen, China, Pakistan, Sudan, right? So why do people think that there are so many foreigners there? One thing we can conclude is that these foreigners like to hang around downstairs, where people can see them. So that's the only reason probably why people think there are so many foreigners there. So when we are going to market our units, definitely we are going to market to Malaysians because it's the clear majority. And the Old Klang Road property, Old Klang Road, you think very central, it's going to be all Malaysians. But when we look at the data, Malaysian is like here only. Indonesian and the Vietnamese clearly already more than the Malaysian, because we also have to look at the transport lines. A lot of them are working the MNCs in KL Central. That's why this property, there are so many foreigners. So we have to be very unbiased. So when we have a property in this area, right, when we look at this data, we have to be able to accept foreign tenants, not be biased, because this is a very big market here. Then going further, this Sungai Buloh property, right, when we break it down, this is a good distribution because what we see is that coming from Selangor itself is about this many. The majority is coming from outside Selangor. So when we buy a property, this is what we want to see. We want to see rental pressure. We want to see that people from outside the Selangor is actually coming over. This is what we want to see, right? So when it comes to price, in Sungai Buloh, we can see distribution of price is between 7 to 750 ringgit. And in Old Klang Road, it's slightly higher, 8 to 900 ringgit. So this one, at least we understand that is the market rate, that is our benchmark. And once we know that the rental rate is about 800-900, we need to identify, can the target tenant actually afford it? So what we have here is that we actually analyze whether one tenancy is by one tenant or one tenancy is actually shared by two tenants. Because let's say the tenancy is 1,000 ringgit. Can one tenant afford it? or is it actually shared by 2 tenants? So this is a very important factor because we need to know actually per head count, how much can they actually pay? So what we see in the Sungai Buloh area, a vast majority of the tenants they can actually afford that 700, 750 ringgit budget. And in Old Klang Road, you see a big majority of single occupancy tenants, they can also afford that 800, 900. So now we have a better picture already. We can look for foreigners or Malaysians in this area, single occupancy, and they can afford it. We do not need to look for couples or 2 people or 3 people to share. So over here, when we add up all our units from across Klang Valley, we also see majority of it are actually single occupancy tenants, and they can actually afford that rental rates. So this one gives us very important data on who do we target further. So when we put it all together, right, this one now tells us exactly who are our target tenants. So what we see here, 1F is female, 1 female occupant in a unit, and 1 male occupant in a unit. So like the data earlier showed, right, the single occupant tenancies are majority, whether female or male, majority. Then there are those tenancies shared by 2 people, 2 female, normally nurses. Normally what you see are nurses, they stay together, or teachers, they stay together, friends. And then 2 male, friends . And then there's M and F, male and female. So this one, couples, 2 person in a tenancy. So when we look at this kind of data, right, what can we conclude? We can conclude that in the co-living environment, majority of them are very young. They are like 20, 30 years old, very, very young, just coming to KL to work. And they are single occupant. They as a single person, they can afford those prices, right? So when we are going to renovate the property, we are definitely going to use this data. So let's say we are doing a co-living environment. What we are going to do is that we are definitely going to target the single female units, the single male units, these 2. Mainly these are 2 targets. So in one room, right, rather than put in double deckers or 2 single beds, we'll just put in queen beds. Because queen beds, we can target the single female. 1 queen bed also can target the single male, and also the couple. So at least we capture 3 main market already. A lot of renovation company, what they'll say is that, okay, I got different rooms co-living, right? Why don't you put a queen bed here, you put in a double-decker bed here, and then in this room, you put in the two twin bed. So when we look at the data, because we have to study it, what we'll say is that, why don't we just use all queen beds? And then maybe one of the room, we put a single bed. So at least we capture all this market. So seeing that our tenants are very young, they're just like 20s and 30s, very young. So when it comes to marketing, we also have to appeal to that generation. What they are looking for is lifestyle. So apart from that, they are also looking for a lot of things, because 20 to 30s, they want a lot of things. They want like facing this direction, whether it's a male or female unit, whether it's mixed, and all kind of things. So how do we actually cater to all that? Like I mentioned, ICONIX is an engineering company. So this is what we call our TMS system. TMS stands for Tenant Management System. Everything and anything about the property and the tenants is actually keyed into this system. So this rent instruction, what I'm going to show is the rent instruction. Is a program that we open up to all our sales partners, all our sales agents, so that when they get a potential tenant, right, they can very quickly match the tenant to the exact room. So during, as you can see, everything's in the system. That's why during the MCO, when everyone couldn't move here and there, luckily we had this system, so we could still rent out rooms based on agents just logging in and showing the potential tenants the room, the view, what it looks like, who are the other tenants. Because more than anything, when the tenant chooses a house, right, they are actually choosing their housemates. So what we tell them is that you just choose and choose until you find the right housemates. And that's how we close many of the sales, and we actually can convince the tenant to refer their friends, because like-minded people, they'll stay together. So when it comes to management itself, what we have to commit to our investors is 100% rent collection, really 100%. Because by the cut-off time of 15, there's a cut-off time of 15, we have to close up all the rooms that are not paying any rental. So far our collection rate, our default rate is like 0.000 something lah. Because as long as right at the front we tell them that there's a very clear cut-off, then at least they will understand more. So what we are seeing in these pictures here is actually the joint move-in. Very important process. When you are going to let a tenant go into your house, you actually have to really screen the tenant. It takes about 1-2 hours, something like an initiation orientation program for the tenants before they go into the house. So property management is not only about taking care of the property, it's also about managing the tenants. And when done properly, this is the results that investors are looking for. Investors are actually looking at our occupancy rate, and they are looking at how much money that we bring back for them. So for this property, we have been managing it in Cheras for about 2 years plus already. We have brought back to the investors about $1.2 million. And occupancy as of November stands at 93%. And this one is another property in Kota Damansara, again bringing back 2.6 million revenue to the investors themselves. And in Sungai Buloh, where everyone was like very skeptical, Sungai Buloh sure can or not. When done properly, it can one, because it just depends on the tenant profile at the time. If you can target properly, the 91 occupancy in Sungai Buloh is actually quite possible. And this is what we achieved in November itself, last week. This is the results from last week. And in terms of revenue, 7.8 million back to the investors. When it comes to renovating a co-living space, right, what tenants want is actually safety and the basic amenities. That's why like this CCTV here is actually a very important thing, because the good tenants they actually want to live in a house that is safe. We manage co-living, so by renovating it for the right tenant profile, we actually target to increase the yield for investors about 50 to 100%. Typical, that is the typical rates that we increase. So this one, as of last month, these are all our tenant centers. So why we need a tenant center? We need a tenant center because when we are managing, let's say like 50 to 100 units and about 300-400 tenants, we definitely need a tenant center. Tenant center is like our office space where we actually have our operating supplies, and where our operating guys we call them committee executives. They are actually stationed there to take care of the building and also the tenants. So here we have from Sungai Buloh, Disara, Emporis, and Ara Damansara, Old Klang Road descends, and all the way to Cheras area. So this one is very important, because when it comes to managing your property, it's very important that the operation people are actually at the site themselves. Yeah, so this one is our tenant center at Emporis. So like mentioned, it's very important when you're choosing a property manager, or if you are self-managing, right, it's very important that you are actually have someone that is close to the property, because tenants, they are very high maintenance nowadays. So when we want to provide better service for the tenants, definitely get someone who is more local to the area, because they also know the tenants better, tenant profile better. So that's all my sharing for now. So if you have any questions.
A lot more to talk, right? If you want, there's a lot of interesting stories. When you're chatting with Hazel, definitely you can hear a lot of interesting stuff that has been happening, and how are they managing. The most important, just now she got mentioned on the data management, on to gather these data and also process them and use them for their own benefit and the best interest of all the house owners, okay, to deliver the best rental, and also make sure that things are delivered professionally. Okay, anyway, thank you again, Hazel.